In a nightclub in Budapest, Hungary, during the spring of 1944, Elek, along with his two friends, is enjoying the night when he notices a girl checking him out. He approaches her and asks her to dance. They start slow dancing and chatting when Elek sees a man at the party arguing with his friends. The man is angry because Elek and his friends are Jews. A fight ensues, and the security throws Elek and his friends out of the club. Outside, Elek is upset that he didn't get the girl's name. The next day, Elek with his friend wakes up late and rushes to catch the bus to the radio repair shop where he and his friend work. Their boss, Josef, was not happy as they were late again. Just then, the customer arrives to pick up her radio. Elek charms her with his German. Josef hands over her fixed radio. They turned on the radio to make it work when they listened to an announcement on the radio about the arrival of Nazis at the Hungarian border. They look outside the shop to find uniformed Nazis marching down their street. Josef hurriedly gives Elek and his friend some money and sends them home. During their trip, they saw a poster demanding all the Jewish youngsters to join the labor service, and not doing so would automatically mean betrayal to the country. Later that day, Elek arrives at his hometown and is warmly welcomed by his father. One of the German neighbors, Balaks, warned Elek's father to take his family away and leave. Elek's father refused as he wanted to stay with his congregation. Suspecting the worst with the Nazis' arrival, Elek secretly asks the neighbor for help. Later at night, Balak took Elek to a convent to obtain forged baptismal certificates from a Catholic priest. That night, he plans to urge his family to use the certificates to escape Hungary if necessary. The next day, a group of men and their families gather at a pickup location. Elek bids farewell to his family and secretly hands his sister, Sophie, the forged baptismal certificates. He asks her to convince their father to use them if the situation worsens. Sophie hands over a necklace to him with their family photo. He then leaves with the other men in a vehicle, uncertain of what awaits them at the camp. Later, they arrive at a Hungarian Jewish labor camp. As soon as they arrive, they are informed to do service for their country as asked. If anyone disagrees with the rules, they will be hanged. Their belongings are taken away forcefully. Weeks passed, and Elek, along with other young Jewish men, was forced into slave labor for the Germans. Those who were unwell were considered burdens and were killed. One day, a heavy cart fell on one of the men's legs. Serenzi, their camp leader, yelled at him to stand up and continue working. Due to the severe injury, the man couldn't even stand. Just as Serenzi was about to shoot him, American military jets began bombing the camp. Elek and his friend Ference jumped off a bridge into the water to save themselves. As they reached the shore and were about to escape, Serenzi pointed his rifle at them. However, due to a bomb explosion, Serenzi fell to the ground. Elek seized the opportunity and took Serenzi's rifle. Serenzi pleaded for his life, and Elek decided to spare him. But Serenzi had another pistol and attempted to shoot Elek. Just then, the injured man shot Serenzi, saving Elek's life. Elek thanked the man and left with Ference. Elek and Ference began their journey back home on foot. With the camp being operated by Hungarians, they no longer knew who to trust. After a long walk, they finally made it back to their hometowns and parted ways. Ference, upon arriving at his residence, was met with hostility from the new owners of his house, who forcefully kicked him out. Meanwhile, Elek found his house entirely destroyed and ransacked. Dismayed, he picked up a broken picture frame from the floor with a folded forged baptismal certificate behind it. His family was nowhere to be found. Elek and Ference sat in disappointment. Suddenly, someone entered the dark room with a rifle, but it turned out to be Balak. He took them to his house and fed them. Balak informed them that the young men were conscripted into labor service, so the authorities could clear the town of women and children more easily. He also shared that, to his knowledge, families were being moved to the west. Ference broke down, fearing he might never meet his family again. Just then, some German soldiers came looking for Elek and Ference. Balak asked them to hide in the basement, but Elek decided to leave, knowing it would be dangerous for Balak if they stayed. Elek and Ference somehow managed to flee and catch a train. Meanwhile, SS Colonel Skorzeny of the Nazis arrived in Hungary to discuss matters with Regent Horthy, the leader of Hungary. Skorzeny had made an alliance with the leaders of the Arrow Cross Party. He commanded Horthy to follow orders regarding the Jewish settlement and labor for the war effort, insisting that Horthy transfer all authority over the Jews to Colonel Eichmann. Skorzeny threatened that non-compliance with this protocol would be considered treason. Whereas Elek and Ferenc arrive at Budapest, they rush back to their workplace to find it is shut down. Elek and Ferenc rush to Josef's doorstep and knock desperately. Yosef's neighbor informed them that he no longer lived there, as all the Jews had been sent to the Yellow Star house. They both left looking for him when they saw the same girl from the club. They greeted her. The girl introduced herself as Hannah. It turns out Hannah lives in the same Yellow Star house as Yosef. She bids farewell to them as she leaves for work. That night, Hannah is on her way home when she notices two Nazi officers malevolently following her. Frightened, she quickens her pace until she reaches her house. She manages to get inside, but the two Nazi officers unwelcomely enter the Yellow Star house. The Jews inside are astonished by their sudden presence and incapable of fighting back. One of the officers forcefully grabs Hannah, who screams and resists. Her father begs them to let her go, but the other officer shoots him. Both officers then take Hannah into a room. Witnessing this fills Elek with rage. The officers force themselves on Hannah. Hearing Hannah's screams, Elek gathers his courage and barges into the room. He grabs the pistol lying on the bed and shoots one of the officers. He then struggles with the other officer and manages to overpower him as well. Later, they all dig a hole and bury the officers' bodies. The next day, Elek meets Hannah's uncle, Miklos. Miklos expresses his gratitude to Elek for saving Hannah and offers him a job delivering Swiss passports to their clients. Without hesitation, Elek accepts the job. Elek starts his new job, delivering passports door to door with Lagos, his co-worker, and an old friend. One day, they witness a family being exposed for violating Nazi rule by listening to the radio. The officer initially asks them to leave, but after a few seconds, he opens fire on them. As the Nazi officers leave, Elek and Lajos rush to the shooting area. They find a little boy named Adam, broken and crying after his mother's demise. Elek consoles him and asks him to come with them, promising to keep him safe. Hannah suggests bringing Adam to the convent where she grew up. Consequently, Elek and Hannah drop Adam at the convent, where he is warmly welcomed by the nuns. Meanwhile, Skorzeny meets with Horthy again regarding the Swiss passports. Horthy had ordered the issuance of over 7,000 Swiss passports to the Jews. Skorzeny orders Horthy to cease this order until further notice, warning that failure to comply will have severe consequences for Hungary. Elek is now working to produce numerous copies of Swiss passports to be distributed to every Jew left in Hungary. These passports will allow Jews to have their freedom and protection. Elek and Ference depart to secretly deliver the Swiss passports to Jewish households. One day, some Nazi officers spot Ference delivering the passports and forcefully take him. Elek sees this from a distance. Ference is eventually interrogated by Nazi officers in the basement of a Nazi building. Despite the torture, Ference remains silent and does not reveal any information. Meanwhile, Elek devises a plan to save Ference. He disguises himself as a Nazi officer, using the uniforms of the two officers they had killed before. At night, Elek and Lajos enter the Nazi building. Using German accents, they gain access to the cell where Ference is kept. Elek is shocked to see Ference lying unconscious on the ground, covered in blood. Outraged, Elek commands the Nazi officers to get Ference out of the cellar. They order the officers to hand over the evidence and take Ference with them. Elek and Lajos take Ference to their safe house, where they care for him and help him recover. On a rainy night, Horthy Jr., Regent Horthy's son, meets Mr. Grudez in an abandoned building. Horthy agrees to Stalin's conditions and joins the Allies. This means the war in Hungary will be over. This news spread like wildfire. People celebrated the surprising news of Hungary's surrender to the Allies, celebrating in the streets. However, on the same day, the Hungarian palace is attacked by the Nazis. Horthy immediately burns all documents connecting him to the Allies. Minutes later, Skorzeny and other Nazi officers arrive. They discover Horthy's secret negotiation document with Stalin for an armistice with the Allies. They abducted him to prevent the delivery of negotiation documents to the Allies. Skorzeny then threatens Horthy to resign from his position or he will execute his son. He signed his resignation and the power was transferred to the Arrow Cross Party. Miklos translates German radio codes for the Jews, summarizing that the Hungarian fascist Arrow Cross Party has assumed power after Horthy is overthrown. Jews begin to forcefully enter the glass house as the Nazis are ordered to seize them. Some are captured, including Rachel, Hannah's sister, and are forced into German vehicles to be killed. One by one, Jews are executed. Elek, disguised in a Nazi uniform, arrives at the execution site to save Rachel and the others. He orders the Nazi officer in charge to let the Jews go, but is refused. The officer immediately shoots Rachel, leaving Alec devastated as his plan fails. Later that day, Alec returns to their hideout to deliver the news of Rachel's passing, causing Rachel's mother to break down in tears. Meanwhile, some Nazi officers gather to discuss the end of widespread Jewish contamination. They decide to kill all the Jews, whereas Alec's family, who had been missing for months, arrives at a train station in Poland with many other Jews wearing yellow stars. They are taken to a chamber for state-sponsored persecution. The women and men are separated and burned alive in the gas chambers. Many, including Alec's family, die innocently. The Nazi officer informs Colonel Eichmann that they are killing almost 10,000 Jews per day. Colonel Eichmann was happy to hear this. Alec, wearing his Nazi uniform, attends a German party to gather information on his family's whereabouts. He converses with Lieutenant Kovac, who reveals plans to clear out all Jews in Budapest city within 6 days. Kovac asked Alec his name and his commanding officer. Alec lies about his name being Muller and leaves to avoid further questions and suspicions. As expected, the city is bombarded and Jews are forcefully evicted and sent to train stations. Alec devises a plan to save as many as possible, using his and his friends' fearless impersonation of Nazi officers to round up Jews and redirect them to safe houses under Swiss protection. They worked on these rescue missions day and night. They work non-stop, redirecting Jews by day and stopping deportations by night, facing increasing risks. They even distributed food rations to people. Alec and Hannah grew closer. They began an intimate relationship. One day, they were alerted of a planned shooting at the river. Alec and his group rush there. Jews are shot one by one. During a discussion with a Nazi officer, a Jew starts running, causing chaos and more deaths. The officers then order to kill them all. With no choice left, Alec with his friends attacked the officers. During the fight, Lajos dies. Back at their safe house, an argument between Alec and Ference. Ference wants to quit, while Alec remains determined to save as many Jews as possible. Continuing the mission alone, Alec stops a Nazi officer from deporting Jews at a pickup point. Karl Lutz, a Swiss consul, allows Jews with authentic and fake Swiss passports to pass. Lieutenant Kovac arrives and forbids anyone without authentic passports to pass. He orders Alec to check everyone's passport, and people with fake passports should be removed. Alec removing Jews with fake passports. In the queue, a mother hands over her passport to her daughter and sacrifices herself. Kovac orders Alec to kill the people who were trying to escape. Alec was unable to do so. Kovac orders them to open fire on them with machine guns, leading to more deaths. Later at night, Alec shares the incident with Hannah. He feels what he is doing is not enough. Over 100 people were killed today in front of him. Hannah consoles him. Later, Alec decides to attend an Arrow Cross meeting. Before he leaves, Hannah asks him to come back soon. Later, at the Nazi meeting, he learns of a plan to attack the glass house and Miklos, Hannah's uncle. The Nazis suspect Miklos of being a spy and conspirator. The glass house is bombarded. Miklos warned them as the glass house is protected by the Swiss delegation. Just then, Karl Lutz arrives and orders the officer to stop this, as it will be interfering with the Swiss diplomatic mission. But the officers shot Miklos. Later, the Russian army arrives in Budapest, causing chaos among the Nazis. They tried shooting Alec, thinking of him as a Nazi officer because of his uniform. Alec pretends to be dead, lying among bodies during the attack. Meanwhile, Hannah receives a call from a nun at the convent, warning that it's no longer safe as the fighting is very close. Hannah and Josef rush to the convent to rescue the children. Alec, Ferenc and other Nazis engage in combat against the Russians. Ferenc is shot, and Alec runs to avoid being hit. He encounters Hannah and the convent children being cornered by Nazis, who forbid them from passing despite their Swiss passports. Alec intervenes, refusing Lieutenant Kovac's orders to shoot them. Commander Klein arrives and orders them to spare them as the Russians have outnumbered them. Kovac refused to take his order, and his commanding officer is Colonel Eichmann, another upper-hand Nazi officer. Klein told him that Eichmann has fled to Berlin and is in charge now. Adam runs to Alec and asks him to come to Glass's house. Kovac, realizing Alec's betrayal, shoots him. Klein then shoots Krieger for insubordination and spares the Jews' lives. The movie shifts 13 years ahead in New York City. There was a wedding ceremony with a lot of people from Glass House 13 years back attending it. It turns out Adam, the little boy Alec and Hannah saved, is the groom. In his speech, he dedicates his happiness to his adoptive parents. Hannah and Elek. He gets emotional while thanking Elek and Hannah for what they did for him. Elek, full of tears, hugs Adam. The couple receives applause. Hannah and Elek declare their love and kiss each other. Thanks for watching the video. Please like it and subscribe the Explanation Pro channel for more contents like this.